We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, ViewRail.
America's leading manufacturer of floating stairs and modern cable glass railings.
They handle every part of the process, from design, engineering, manufacturing, delivery, all the way to installation.
There is a 10-year structural and finish warranty on all products installed by ViewRail certified technician.
Nearly all components are made in-house, giving you more control over style, material, finishes, budget, and timeline.
All products are designed as a modular integrated system that are engineered for easy installation. It's like putting together an erector set.
Thanks so much again, ViewRail, for sponsoring this episode. Welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast. Today, we're just going to talk a little bit about North Bennett Street School. I've got a bunch of questions for this guy. I mean, quite honestly, we saw each other last night and we're like, have you... No, wait, I should say that. We probably shouldn't talk about that yet. Do you think... And then we've kind of moved on from there. So we're a little bit champing at the bit, ready to...
Yeah, I'm curious.
Start talking about something. This is a question.
That what I want... we talked a little bit when I was up in Boston for the North Bennett Street deal.
Okay.
I'm on the search committee for the North Bennett Street president that we're looking for. So,
El Presidente.
So one question I asked, I think you guys want to hear out there, is what an apprenticeship looks like. Like, what is... Like, the whole way North Bennett Street set up is the 2-year apprenticeship, you get out, you're a journeyman, and you work towards being a master. So you are in your apprenticeship. You started dabbling with tools, a couple of years before when you were at K-Life, you'd start building stuff. Hey, Dad, I need a tool.
That's right.
That's when maybe your education started, and we would laugh with
Richard,
do you want to complete all my sentences?
I'd love to. I'm just ready to talk. I'm just ready to hear what's
Talking
going on.
to Richard and about... What was I going to say?
I don't know, but this is how you're talking. We're talking to Richard about, and so I'm just like, Richard. About,
There's an old Bob Newhart thing where he is interviewing the slowest talker in America. And the guy, he says, hey, you represent the slow talkers in America. Yes, I represent. And Bob Newhart's like, the slow talkers of America. What I would like to say, the slow talkers of America. What I'd like to anyway.
That's how I feel. That's funny. They took that and put it in Zootopia too.
Yeah.
It's all animals in this world, and so they need a connection at the DMV office. So they go into the DMV office, and the DMV worker is a sloth. It's the exact same thing. Where they're like, yes.
Okay, so I'll speed up a little bit. I think the thing is that people want to know what an apprenticeship looks like. Most people are not trained in anything, right? Mm-hmm. There is no apprenticeship at all for being a builder, Dave, for being a craftsman. It's all learn on the job. You are actually going into a program where they are training you. Like, what are they training you? Like, what kind of secrets are they giving away? Or is it just, you know what, we're just one thing at a time kind of going through this thing. So tell us about your apprenticeship at North Bennett Street.
Where to begin? So they're definitely giving us like a full apprenticeship. And I think Steve varies kind of what he teaches the intro class every time based on kind of the class speed and everything and like where everyone's at. Like we've got like Kevin, who was on the show, has a lot of experience going into it. And so
experience means he's built before.
Yes. And he came into the program pretty humbly. I think you can come into the program with a lot of experience and do it pretty cocky and be like, yeah, they're teaching me stuff here, but I already knew that. And you're kind of not getting your money's worth out of the program that way. And so I think Kevin's kind of come into it very humbly and has been like, I don't know. Like I've never, been formally trained in this. I want to learn all this stuff. So anyway, a lot of people can look at that and be like, well, what are you doing in this program? But I actually think there's a lot that the program still has to offer.
Because a lot of the things you're learning are pretty basic.
Right now, pretty basic. But as we continue in the program, there's so much more that the program has to offer in terms of like little tips and tricks here and there. Our class has been talking about it a lot and like how the program works. And we're kind of like self-evaluating, like what are we actually learning here? What's going on here? We always come back to like, even if you were someone like Kevin who came in with a lot of experience, you're going to get so much out of it because you like encounter a roadblock and you go, hey, Steve, who is right in front of me, who I can ask a question to, I'm seeing this. And Steve's got a really trained eye and has been doing a lot of this stuff for years. Okay,
but you're talking like, and we did this and we did that. What did you do?
Oh, okay.
Right, give us specifics because you built a shed, for example.
Yeah.
The idea being you're learning framing, you're learning,
Yes.
joinery, you're learning.
Okay, well, let me walk it through. So we started with our tools. Our tools were square one, like tuning them up, using them, and going through like sharpening, all this stuff.
All hand tools, not power tools.
All hand tools.
Right.
We had an intro to like tools that he was like, put a list of tools on the board. These are all the tools you're going to need
Hand
for
tools or
Brookwood
power
Farms.
tools?
Tools, everything.
Okay.
So he's got on there like drills. He's got other stuff. So we then go.
Hand drills or power drills?
Can you use context clues? What do you think? What would you say? Like if you're trying to guess, what would you think that I'm talking about? Now, if you had to guess, what would you say? Am I talking about hand tools? Are we sitting there doing this?
That's what I'm asking. That's what I think everybody wants to know.
Okay, yeah, fair point. No, power tools.
Okay.
It's everything. It was everything because he was like, bring a beater plane out there. Like bring a block plane that you're not super attached to that you can throw around in the wet grass. But then also go plane up an edge that you haven't cut right with a saw. Bring whatever you want. Bring all the tools that you think you'll need. And then I'm going to give you a list of tools that you will need. And so he's got on there like a level, a framing square, wing dividers, like all this different stuff that he's got that are like mandatory for on the job. And I can't remember the whole list, but I've got them all in a tool bag. And so I can make a list of them and write them out and stuff. But he was like, these are the tools that you're going to need in order to do the job of building a shed out in Brookwood Farms. And so as he did that, he also went through like, here's how you use some of these tools. And so we walked through what's a worm burner versus what's a circular saw. And so like learning that one does a geared ratio turning and one does it's just the motor is turning the actual wheel. And the geared ratio turning is going to go way faster and be stronger and like to be ready for the kick before it starts. Like we learned all these like little things. And so it doesn't feel like there's necessarily secrets that he's providing, but it's more just you have a person who is very seasoned in craft who is there to answer these questions and go, well, have you thought about this? Well, have you thought about this? So we built the sheds, and I've got more to talk about that on a little bit when I want to tell you about
because that was very, we got a lot more to dig into.
I'll go into it now then. I'll come back to what we've gone through in our apprenticeship later.
Okay.
I'll just jump right into this. Because
I remember the framing square. Okay.
Yeah.
Now my career when I got out was always trim carpentry. I was never a framer.
Mm-hmm.
And yet understanding how to use a framing square, which is a pretty crazy
device,
right? Like Fred Hodgson wrote a book called The Steel Square, and it's a 2-volume book on things that you can do with a framing square. I mean, it's freaking, you're like, what? 2-volume book, and it was a bestseller, right? And so basically he's showing you how to use a framing square. You talk about wing dividers and just, okay, tell us what all that is.
Wing dividers are the thing that spread like this. They look like a compass without the pencil. You take them. We use them for making a story stick.
Okay.
So
what's a story stick?
Story stick is basically something that you use. It's a tool that you make on the job, and it's something that acts as a reference for your entire building. So for us, we use them for laying out our shingles. And so once all of our corner boards were on the house and set in their final positions, asterisk there because we actually made our story stick before we set it. So it got us into trouble a little bit later, and we shifted some things around. But in an ideal world, you set your corner boards, then you build a story stick. You kind of start with the ideal spacing of what
exposure of the shingle.
Yeah,
right?
So you want your exposure to be 4 inches in an ideal world, but it's never going to be that because different building heights are different and things are going to fall wherever they may along the building. And so you take that 4 inches and you take your wing divider on a scrap piece of wood that fits within from the top of the water table to right underneath the soffit, and you slide it in. You want a little bit of space in it. You don't want it to be like airtight because you're going to be moving it around quite a bit. So we left 1/8 of an inch. We took our wing divider at 4 inches and we walked it up this stick. And we were like, okay. And once it got to that final reveal, we were expecting the wing divider to swing up and have 1/8 between the top of the story stick and the 4 inches. Well, if it wasn't that, then we were like, okay, let's do some math. Let's divide it up. And then let's figure out how we can make it close to 4 inches, but then whatever it needs to be to where the reveal is going to be, what it needs to be. So we shifted it. We ended up being at like 4.12 or something, like close to 4. And so we just set the wing divider to that. And then once it swung up, it matched perfectly.
Everybody understands that what you're trying to do is that when you're setting your exposure and that face exposure, you're trying to do it so you don't end up with a 1-inch shingle at the top because you didn't do the math right? And so
just what happens with the story stake, just to finish this really quick, and I think it'll bring everything together. You take the story stake, you put it against one corner board, you mark tick marks along every one of those marks that you've made with the wing divider. Then you go to the other side of the corner board, you mark tick marks, and then you use that as your reference frame. So that is now, that one line is where you're going to set the bottom of your shingles, so the butt end of your shingles. So you put them there, and then you move on up. And so you snap a line at the next set of lines. And now the distance between those is like 4.12 for us. And so that distance is your exposure on your shingles. So then you keep moving up the house.
So realize that today, where people do vinyl siding or things like that, and there's clips and you snap things in place, you can't lay it out like that as well anymore when you've got a clip system because, well, it's
a preset clip.
So everything's preset. And so when I was at Colonial Williamsburg, we were walking around and we noticed that the bottom edge of the clapboard had a bead in it, and the bead lined up perfectly with the windowsill. Yeah. And then they put a bead in the windowsill, and you had these lines that were so perfect running. And you're like, oh my gosh, the thought that they went into doing that. They just didn't start throwing stuff up there.
Well, and that's the, like, you're close on there. That's like step 2 is like whenever we were in the process of doing it, because Steve just kind of taught us it. Like, he's not trying to teach us like you're going to go build Colonial Williamsburg. He's just trying to teach us the concepts.
Right.
And then as we ran into these roadblocks later, he kind of came back and was like, and if you really wanted to get crazy, you could have done this. And our group was a little bit faster than some of the other groups. We had a lot more experienced guys in our group. Not myself, but the other guys in my crew. So it was kind of funny because we were at a point where we were looking around at the other groups and we're like, we could have done cool things. Like, why didn't you tell us about that, Steve? But it was smart the way he handled it because it was better that way, that we weren't focused on all these things, because we would have gotten lost in the details and we would have been working on these sheds for 10 months rather than.
But I mean, the other idea is.
Wait, hold on. The level 2.
No, you hold on.
The level 2 is not just matching the wing dividers to where the exposure hits at the bottom of the water table and the top of the soffit. It's where it matches with the window reveal, the top of the door jamb, and it hits all of those points. Yeah. And there's a little bit of fudging you can do where you can add like a 30-second here, a 30-second here, a 30-second here, and you like for the preceding lines that go up. And so
because you'll never pick that up with the eye.
Right. But it's,
So back to this apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Right. You guys built a shed, right? Which is, by doing that, you're framing, right? And then you get into roofing.
We're learning how to use tools. Like a lot of this, like tools that he had us buy at the beginning of the school year, we're just kind of sitting there like, when are we going to use this? How's it? Like we had the what are they called? You put them on a framing square to do rafters.
Yeah.
What are they called? Do you remember? Mine's a CB. It's the brand is CB, but I can't remember someone's sitting there in the comments.
Yeah, I know.
You haven't used them in so Richard would know.
I haven't used them in so long.
I
don't know if Richard would know because it's kind of a framing tool, but it's a stair layout tool. It's a
stair divider. No, what are they called? Whatever. That's you gotta frustrate someone.
Hold on, you gotta pull up your phone. I gotta know now. Oh my gosh.
CB was the brand. Stair gauge is the tool. All right, so this is stair gauge. We took our stair gauges and I bought them. They're $15 on Amazon, and were the ones that he recommended us to get. You can get them; they're kind of stubby, or you can get like longer ones, so they actually rest and reference really well. And so we got the longer ones. And some of it, like myself, I'd never seen a stair gauge before. So like Ryan, who's my benchmate who worked in the union, he's like, "Oh yeah, I've got a pair of these. Like we use them all the time. Like whatever." But I'm like, I have no idea. So we're all looking at these tools that he's asked us to buy, and we're like, what do these even do? Like, why do we have this? And sure enough, like we used every single tool on the list that he asked us to get, and it was great. But that was kind of part of this apprenticeship, almost like a Mr. Miyagi thing where you're like, what am I doing with this? Why am I waxing on, waxing off? And then we get out on the job site, and he's like, go get this tool that I asked you to get. And it was funny because Steve's been doing this enough years where he's asked everyone to do these things, and sure enough, people are like, we're never going to use that. And then he's like, all right, everyone, bring out your this. And some people are like, Steve, I never bought that. And he's like, it was on your list. I asked you to buy it. What are you doing? And you're kind of like, oh man, I'm an idiot. Why didn't I buy that? Anyway, so we're out on the job site, and we're learning these tools. We're doing this framing and stuff. And like, honestly, there were days in the building of the shed where I'm like, what are we doing building a shed? Like, we can learn this anywhere. We can learn how to do this. You can learn this on YouTube. What am I doing here? And then those days that you would have those thoughts were the days where you're like in the framing stage. And Steve's like, it's got to be under a 16th. It's got to be really precise. And we're like, we're framing, Steve. Like, it doesn't have to be precise right now. And then sure enough, we get to like the end phase of the shed. And he's like, depending on how well you did your framing, now it's going to be an easier time for you because you're going to have 90 degrees on your sides. You're going to have all this stuff. And so we're like, okay, good. I'm glad we did that. It was annoying and it was stupid and it felt like it wasn't making a point. But then now that we did those things in the way that he asked us to do them, and it was like, oh, okay, we actually built it way better than we ever would have built.
So I think
else.
that one of the advantages, good things about North Bennett Street is that it sounds like Steve's the same way as our instructors were.
Dennis and Robert.
Yeah, that they are asking for, requiring, mandating tight tolerances,
Oh, yeah.
building at a level that a lot of people don't build at. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I can't tell you how many times in my career, good framers would come along and you'd ask them about their pricing, and what they would say, look, we really care about those tight tolerances and stuff like that. You can pay for cheaper framing, but you're going to pay for it later because boards are going to bow and, door frames aren't going to be square.
Oh my gosh. We were milling our doors and it was like, oh, thank God we did this right.
Yeah.
Or we made a mistake in one of our doors. Like we had the sizing too narrow or something. We ended up having to cut off like 2 inches off of our door because we were using salvage doors. And so, 2 inches off a door is a lot.
A lot.
So we were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we made this mistake. And like paying for the mistakes of like poor framing later.
Yeah, or poor planning. So one of the things I remember it teaching was just this desire for, or mandate for, really good craftsmanship. Yeah. Because you're right. You're doing the framing and you're instead of framing to a 16th. Are you kidding me? But you're really chasing after a tight tolerance so that everything's good later. And so that if you aren't careful like that, let's just say you're a 1/4 inch out on your the wall of your framing from side to side.
Right.
All of a sudden, those shingles as they go up, all of a sudden they're crooked.
You're saying a 1/4 inch. I'm like,
yeah,
I can't imagine being a 1/4 inch.
Right. And so it's a focus on quality and a high standard. And a couple things that we're talking about that you don't get if you're trying to just learn it by experience and stuff like that is there is a way to build it. And there's builders out there and craftsmen who are completely 100% self-taught. Mm-hmm. That they started working on their house and then started working on then all of a sudden they got a framing job. All of a sudden they're framing this remodel and they don't know what a stair gauge is for a framing square, and they would probably never buy a framing square. Mm-hmm. You would use a Construction Master, calculator to try to compute those differences and try to help you figure out the angles of a rafter and everything else. And so you are, at the end of the day, the framed product might be the same, but the two craftsmen who are getting there, one who's never done the framing square and just kind of figures it out versus the guy who actually has it and figures it out and knows the angles and everything else, knows that old way of building, I think, is a better builder, a better craftsman, a more knowledgeable guy that can solve more problems going down the line. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's just an example of, by understanding the past as well as the today, you're better off.
Yeah.
Sorry, little rant there.
I agree. Well, okay, to just continue on the path.
Yes.
Whenever we came back and milled doors, we kind of got another lesson on like milling wood.
I thought you had salvage doors.
Yeah, sorry. Salvage doors. We milled the board and batten doors. So we had salvage doors on the front doors that were like a 6-paneled or like 1/2 panel. What would that be called? Where you got windows and then a panel? There's like a window section and then a non-window section of one of our doors.
Historically, they're called sash doors.
This is a sash door.
But you build it. The shed was how big? 8 by 12.
16 by 12, or yeah, 16 by.
It wasn't 16 feet long.
12 by 10.
12 by 10. That sounds right.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I can't remember.
And so you had a front door, you had a window.
Yep.
And you had a back door.
That's right.
Okay. And the back door was a board and batten door that you guys built.
Front door, 2 windows, window on the back side, board and batten door on the front gable end.
Okay. Back gable end.
Yeah. Yeah. They were oriented like basically 12 that way and then 10 that way. And so, you know what I'm talking about?
The gable end was running the long way.
The gable ends were facing where kind of like our tent was, where all of our tools lay. And so it was like, and they were 1, 2, 3 in a row, all gable ends facing us. And so the gable end with the door was what we were staring at. So I'm always like, that's the front. But like when we drew it, the technical front was the right, like if you're staring at that gabled front end, if you go around the right side, that was technically the front.
So it wasn't a gable facing building. It was
not a gable facing building.
Okay.
That was like a side door technically.
Yeah.
And it was a double door. So it was supposed to be like you get stuff in that door.
I see.
Supposed to be. In theory, in practice, when Steve bought the materials for it, he was like at the lumber yard and was like, they should be about this long, this long, this long for the thresholds. Mm-hmm. He ended up buying a little bit too little material. And so our doors lost like 4 inches each. And so we had like I don't remember the RO, but it was like, they were 22-inch doors. Each of the double doors. So it was like a 44
double doors were the board and batten.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they were just little. They were little board and batten doors. Yeah.
Got it.
But it was, anyway. So we learned how to mill. We learned how to do like the process of running wood through. We used a shaper.
So now you're in the shop learning to use shop tools.
Correct.
Which a lot of people, if you're being self-taught, wouldn't understand or wouldn't learn unless they started trying to build a shop.
So we haven't done like machine maintenance, but that's coming.
Right.
So that's PC2. We do a lot of machine maintenance work,
which is extremely valuable. And I used it quite a bit when I was setting up my own shop when I got back from North Bennett Street.
Yeah.
How to sharpen your tools, how to, change your blades, how to, fix things if a planer was, off kilter and all those different things. So it is valuable.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited. But right now it's like, don't touch the outfeed. Like,
right.
And we're like, okay, I don't know what that means yet,
right.
But I won't touch it. But I get it because it's like how much it
right.
sits and if it's going to be level or not. But anyway, so we're like at a state right now where we're like kind of figuring these things out, and we're like every little thing we do.
Okay, so just backing up. Sorry. First thing you do is get tools. Learn how to sharpen, fix, and get tools.
Hand tools.
Hand
and
tools.
Learn how to prepare them.
Right. Second thing was the shed.
Second thing was like a tool list for the shed.
Okay.
No, actually, that's not true. Second thing was drafting.
Oh, yeah.
Because we drafted our sliding lid box, or not our sliding lid, our oilstone box. Then we used some of our hand tools, and we all by hand tools built these oilstone boxes.
And an oilstone box is a little box that holds your oilstone.
That's
that
right.
you can sharpen your chisels on. And
Steve
things like
basically
that.
said, I'm not going to mandate you using oilstones. It's just what I recommend you buying. I highly recommend you using oilstones, but
because there's also water stones. There's
ceramic stones.
Yeah, there's other ways of sharpening your tools.
Yeah. And so he basically said, like, if you already own some of these other systems and you want to use that, do it. But I'm going to recommend oilstones because they last longer and they're what I've been using.
Well, realize that, I mean, a lot of guys, and I've said this before, don't even know how to sharpen their own chisels, right?
Which I'm about to get there. I can't imagine not having sharp chisels or what you do when you don't have sharp chisels.
100%. And if you, I mean,
I can't imagine.
Well, it's why when I've told that story that a guy, we were asking one of the substitute instructors who came into North Bennett Street, how do you know a great craftsman? He goes, you see how sharp their tools are. And it's just, you're discovering that now. But when you get into those conversations, and the great thing about North Bennett Street is you get into the conversation about what is the best way to sharpen your tools. What is the best way to?
Well, that's the thing what I was saying about Steve. You've got someone there to go, this is what I do. Or you're like, I can't figure this out. And he's like, you're not doing this. You're like, oh, I wish I knew that.
But you realized, I think I realized from the outside looking back how esoteric or weird that conversation might be for people, right?
What do you mean? What conversation?
How to sharpen your chisels, right? And that there's water stones and ceramic stones, and there's a hollow grind, and there's a, how to.
Oh, you don't mean like weird for like me as a person in this thing to be like, how do I do this? But
No.
you mean like outside looking in, people going like,
I'm thinking it's a 1% conversation. It's that I bet that majority of the guys listening to this conversation don't have sharp chisels. I would say that 98% of them don't, right?
Yeah.
And so, I realized that, when do I use chisels? When would I even have those things? But realize that this apprenticeship at North Bennett Street is a place where you are having deep, meaningful conversations about how to sharpen a tool.
Yeah.
And that isn't common today,
mm-hmm.
right? With the disposable tool generation where, you burn up your saw and then you unscrew the blade and throw it out and put a fresh blade in there.
Really?
And you don't, resharpen. Things are disposable. Saw blades today on power tools are meant to be disposable. I mean, people aren't resharpening, jigsaw blades. I mean,
that would make sense.
Just not doing that.
Yeah. I thought you were talking like a table saw blade or something.
Well, even a table saw blade, we send ours out to get the carbide teeth resharpened and stuff like that. I'm talking about some of these saw blades that would go onto a skill saw that
that makes sense.
A power saw that would be out in the field.
Yeah.
Or a reciprocating saws,
that makes sense.
Sawzall,
right? They're all disposable.
It also is all disposable. So why would I sharpen tools, right?
Yeah.
And you know how now.
I don't know how to do that small of tools, I don't think.
Well, you know how to sharpen a tool.
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, so buying tools, getting them sharp, drafting. And drafting's a whole nother, thing that you've been exposed to now, right?
Drafting's unreal. That's like the coolest thing.
It is the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And
because I'm not a drawer. Like, I don't think I'm good at drawing.
You don't even know how to say it either.
Drawer.
I'm not a drawer. What in the world? Is that my son?
I watched a Nate Bargatze
you a
special. I probably said it like him I watched that like 2 nights ago. You know how he talks funny? Yeah, I probably picked up something on accident. But
let's try that again.
I'm not a good
Draftsman.
Yeah. No, I don't mean to draftsman. I mean like if I'm gonna draw a doodle of a puppy, I'm not good at that. Like I don't consider myself a good person at drawing. I want to say drawer. But you put lines straight on a page and then you connect them to each other, and it's like you don't even need to know the angle necessarily. You just need to know how long you want something, and then everything connects to itself. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I no, and here's how it matters out in the field, or for us, is that we are building our design team right now.
Yeah,
and I want our plans to look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of our drawings are done in CAD, AutoCAD. Darla, who's running my team, is spending a lot of time building standards for how you draw.
That's cool.
And you guys were probably just learned the idea of line weight, that you have heavier lines and lighter lines depending on what you're doing.
Don't they auto do that in CAD though?
It can do it, but most people don't because it doesn't matter. I'm blowing these panels out. It's 8 sheets. I don't have time to, make, the soffit detail different than the roof. And it's just, and so you end up with ugly plans, and you end up with ugly hatching, and you end up with these plans. A lot of those Wednesday design things that I'm fixing just by changing materials and just how the thing's drawn because it's ugly the way it's drawn. So
better said, it's not clear the way it's drawn.
Good point. Yes. It's not it's not reality, right? It's not, they'll show this hatching of this stone on the outside of a home, and it looks chaotic. It looks like a Jackson Pollock picture. And, it's just confusing, right? It's just not real of what really is going to be expressed. And so anyway, there's the subtlety of building, but again, if you're just learning this by yourself, where will you learn drafting? Where will you learn things? And I'm comparing how most people are trained today in the field, kind of just you learn as you go.
Yeah.
That you are being exposed to the sharpening, the drafting, these opening up of these other, the tolerances, the quality that can be tough to get.
Yeah. I mean, the drafting thing like is so easy. Like it is not a complicated process to like draw to a scale and then connect 2 points on the thing and make them square to each other. Like you get a drafting table and it just does it. Like you just follow the lines and it's not drawing, it's tracing more like, you know what I mean? Like you're just like, I need to make a tick on a ruler 3 inches up because this is a half scale drawing and I need to make something that's 6 inches. So I go mark it at 0, mark it 3 inches. And then you go to the other side, mark it 0, mark it 3 inches. And then I go zzz, connect, move up, zzz, connect. Okay, there's going to be one point that goes down at a 45-degree angle. I bring out my 45-degree angle square, and I just, and then literally I pull everything back, and I'm like, holy cow, I'm a good drawer, you know? But it's
draftsman.
I'm a good draftsman.
Then the reason you do spend time doing that, the reason you do that is so that when you go to build it, you can either, if it's full scale, drop it right on top of it and go, is it the right size?
Or B, every little measurement. When we were drawing those sheds, I drew one of the complicated sides, and I put what I thought was enough of information, like in terms of like widths and measurements and everything else like that. And then we got on the job site away from everything else that we had done, and all we had was this drawing. And we're all sitting there, and they're like, all right, whose name is on this drawing? Oh, it's Jackson. Jackson, what do we do about this thing? And I was like, oh. And I was sitting there, and I got 3 guys looking at me like, we're ready to build. What are we doing? And I was like, okay, I got to do the math. Hold on. Let me figure this out. I should have written this the first time. And luckily enough, it happened to each one of those guys. It didn't really happen to everyone.
You're building it on paper, right?
You're building it on paper.
You're pre-building it.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
And every little detail, every little thing. And so it's funny because I was drawing the soffit fascia and
cornice.
No, what is it? Fascia, soffit, and then what's this?
Cimation or corona or
I don't know what it was. It's like almost like a, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Fascia, soffit, and then the roof line came out to this like little bit of a,
and that would be where the corona and the cimation are.
Sure, I'll call it the corona, but maybe it was the corona. That sounds right. I don't remember, honestly, which is bad, but I asked you for that vocab sheet because I'm really trying to nail those down, but it's hard. I know what an OG is now, but anyway, I drew that, but I like missed what I would say in the drawing of it. I didn't think were necessary numbers per se, but then in real life, I was like, I wish we had that number. And like, so for example, I had how the soffit and fascia were going to intersect. And so I knew that they were just butting up against each other. And then the soffit was going to have like a 5/8 insert into the
dado.
Yeah, thank you. 5/8 dado that was going to go into a rabbet on the cornice. What is it? Cornice? Corona. That was going to go on the corona. And so I was like, I had that number. And I was like, great. And I was like, well, what's the reveal? It's like, I don't know what the reveal is. We got to figure that out. And so then we just had to do backwards math rather than like on our oilstone box. It was like, I know exactly. Anyway, cut to weeks later, we're drafting our sliding lid box and Steve's coming up to us like, you've already got that number represented over here. Why are you double marking how long this is? Like, cause you draw it from each side.
Right.
And so I was like, Steve, I just don't want to not have a number. He was like, okay, we'll erase that one. I was like, okay, that's fine. But you get to it, like, once you make the mistake, which I think is so good, Steve lets us, like, fail a lot, which is awesome. You go, oh, I'm never doing that again. Like, I never want to run into that issue again. I probably will, but
I think the advantage of this is that you're pre-building everything you're doing. You're thinking about, oh shoot, I forgot about how that overlaps this thing. I got to add 3/4 because it's going to go past that point, and it's really not this long. It's actually this long. And so
every little thing.
Yeah,
you're
pre-building it, and so taking that time to put it together in your head, right, makes it go better later.
And the other funny thing, and I think I've told this story before, but one of the carpentry guys came over because we were both on site at this Brookwood farm. We're kind of like over here, and then carpentry is kind of like on this long stint over here. They're building their sheds, and they've been doing it all year. And then we're building our sheds.
But theirs are timber framed. No, they're
stick framed.
Oh, you say carpentry.
Not
I'm
PC2.
sorry.
Yeah, PC2 was where we were. They were building a timber frame building.
Yeah, okay.
And they took it down so we could build our sheds. And they took it down so they could transport it to site where it was going to be put together. Anyway, so we get there, and they've got their foundation set. They've got like all this stuff done, and we have nothing. And so like we set up our tent where we had all our tools set under, and we're like, all right, we got to figure this out. By like 2 weeks in, we had all of our frame done. Like we had our ridge line done. And the carpentry guy came over and was like, all these carpentry students are upset at how fast you guys have put these sheds together. And everyone in our class is kind of like, we've been taking forever to do these things. Like we're taking so long. And then we kind of looked over at carpentry, and we had passed them in what they had done on their sheds. And we were like, what in the world? And Peter was like, I had to remind them that you guys have already built these sheds in your head, whereas they are learning a lot of this stuff like out here, and like they're saying, hey, we're going to do this, but they're not drafting them first.
That's fascinating.
So they're like realizing on the job, like whatever those tiny things
not
are.
only pre-building it helps you do it, but it makes you faster.
Oh, it was faster. It was so much faster. We flashed by them. And then in the end, we about evened up, but we had to shingle a lot more, and they did a lot more clapboards than we did. And so that cuts down on time like crazy.
That's interesting.
I think their front was clapboard, and everything else was shingled. Sorry, our front was clapboard, everything else was shingled. I think theirs was the opposite.
Okay, so tools, drafting, shed. Now now you're back in the shop.
Back in the shop.
Milling, or what are you doing?
We did a sliding lid box, and the intent behind that design was, we did a sawhorse first, and the intent behind the sawhorse is it's all milled. So it's a milling project. So we're just trying to like get comfortable with the process of joint to face, plane down to side, plane to thickness, joint and edge, cut to thickness. Like that's the process we're trying to get familiar with, and then put those pieces together and then make them we did some compound cuts.
Again, the idea and concept is that you are not only learning how to build in the field, you're also building in a shop.
Yes.
Using a joiner, a planer,
yes,
table saw, cutoff saw, radial arm saw. Yeah. And so you're learning how to, mill and take a rough board. Rough milled board.
We're making stock lists every time.
Yeah.
We make our stock list, which has, this is what I'm buying in the rough. This is what the final milled pieces will look like.
Right.
And then go from there.
Right.
And so when we do that process, the purpose of that one was just it should be all machine. And then the purpose of the oilstone box was that it's all hand. And then the sliding lid box was machine and hand. So we milled it to within a 32nd of all of our thicknesses, and then we planed down the final bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome. So did you finish your box?
Finish my box, finish the sliding lid box.
And what are you guys working on next?
So now what we're doing, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about, and had a lot of questions about, we are now doing joinery.
Ah, yeah.
And I'm hating it. I mean, what in the world? So
like dovetails and half laps and all that.
Not even yet. We're done half laps.
Okay.
So basically, I was saying, I can send you the picture of the sheet that we got. Okay, this is all the ones that we're going through.
Basically, you have a sheet. What is that? About 20 joints.
That's right. And we're doing like 7 of them, I believe.
Okay.
So we're doing the half lap, the cross lap, the T lap, the half T lap, half dovetail, and then something else.
So tongue and groove, rabbit and dado, stop dado, through dado.
So you see some of those we're not doing.
Right. End half lap. I'm just reading off these pages.
Yeah.
T half lap, cross half lap, stopped half lap dovetail, cogging.
I think they'll see a picture of it.
I know, but I'm just reading. Tenon miter.
Read along with
Are you going to do blind miter?
I don't know. I don't know what that is.
Well, good thing I read it off. So which ones are you doing?
I've circled them on the sheet for your convenience. We're doing an end half lap, a T half lap, a cross half lap, stopped T half lap, a half lap dovetail, half lap dovetail. Basically, one of the dovetails doesn't have.
They'll have a picture they can see. So, yes. So why are you hating it? Because you can't make it perfect or something?
Dude, okay, so we get in there and I start working.
What kind of wood are you using?
Eastern white pine.
Okay.
I don't have a shoulder plane yet. So I went into the school.
Idiot.
Yeah, I went into the school store and I bought
Who doesn't have a shoulder blade?
What
kind of craftsman are you?
I bought one from Wood River.
No shoulder blade, people.
Do you have a wood? Do you know what Wood River is?
Yes.
Are they good or bad or what's their deal? Middle of the line? You don't know enough.
I would probably buy an antique Stanley or a Sargent.
I wish I'd bought an antique Stanley. I need to go. I don't know where to get antique Stanleys off the rip. You know, like I can go to eBay, but I'm like, am I overpaying for this or like $400 for some of these? And I know I'm not going to pay $400 for it, but I think I should pay like $160 to $250.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
I've got one in there you could take with you.
Can I?
Yeah.
Dude, the problem with this one is it's tall and it's thin. And
which is what those planes are.
It's medium. And so Ryan has a Stanley 92 and it's medium sized. It's not super long and it's stouter than mine. So I really like
You're lusting over his tool.
Dude, his is so good. Ryan, I'm sorry because I know you listen. I used it when he was sick and I was like, it was sitting on his desk and I was like, I need to try it out. So I grabbed it and I used it. I would feel great if he did.
Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins, by the way.
So he, oh my gosh, that thing is so good. It's so much better. Mine leaves behind a trail. Like it almost like grooves every time I cut with it. And I'm like, I'm just trying to plane with this thing. I'm not trying to make a little valley with this. I'm just trying to get a shoulder plane going. So that was day one. And I was a little behind because I was sick, or my wife was sick, so I was home with her. I was helping, whatever. So I get back in. Oh, we also made shooting boards.
What's a shooting board?
It's great. You not know?
I know, but
okay.
Most people don't know.
I was like, do I know something you don't know? Literally was like so excited. I was like, you don't know about this? Oh, I got to tell you. Okay, so what it is it's basically like it's a jig for planing the end grain of your wood. And so we made it out of 2 pieces of plywood. We basically have like an 18-inch long piece of plywood, and then it's 14 inches long or 14 inches wide. And then the next one is like 10 inches wide. So there's like a 4-inch, 3-inch little gap. That's what you set your Stanley 5 on. And then it's got a piece of wood that you almost can brace another, like, so I take my Eastern white pine block and I slide it up against this one. And then I've got my shoulder plane on its side, and I just go, and it squares the edge of your board, and it makes cutting in grain so great because it braces. Like when you're cutting in grain, you're most worried about it shooting at and like what is it called?
Breaking the end.
Yeah, breaking the end. What's it called when it like blows out? Like it blowing out the back. You don't want that at all. So what we did was this piece of wood basically, when you put your wood up against it, it braces it so the end grain can't like splay off like it normally wants to, but it's held up against this. So you're just shooting your plane up against it, and it is great. So anyway, I really like that, and that's been super helpful. I got to square mine up a little bit because it's like not perfect. And so we've got like a little adjustment thing that we can do with it. And so I need to put a couple more pieces of tape into it. Anyway, so we did that. So we're using those jigs to help us like make all these joints, and not that's just to square the end of it. That's not necessarily. But so then we like take the block of wood, we make our chisel marks, we take our marking knives, we make our marking knife marks, and then we're like chiseling out these things and then shoulder planing out some of this stuff to get it down to make that in half lap and everything. And so in the process of it, I'm like doing it. And so I get to the step where I'm shoulder planing. And I'm shoulder planing with this new plane. I'm like, I don't love it. I'm not like, it keeps tilting over on me because I'm big hands, I'm clumsy. And so it like keeps tipping over and I'm like, dang it. Because when it does that, it just eats into the wood. And so Steve is telling us too this whole time, he's like, you got to have really tight tolerances with this. Like, I'm not going to let you move on to the next one unless they're like really tight tolerances. So everyone keeps walking back to their desk like, Steve had me redo it. Steve had me redo it. And I'm like, so I haven't even showed him mine yet. And so I do it. I do one side and I just blow past my mark. I'm like way under it. I'm like, dang it. So I put that one aside and I start over and I do the next one and I go and you like saw in the other way, but you're leaving a little bit of meat for you to like go with your shoulder plane. So I go with my shoulder plane. I'm like, okay, it's ending up pretty nice. Like I can figure this out. So then I'm on like the final step and you take your chisel, and the way Steve describes it and the way that he's doing it in front of the class is he's like, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chisel and just this fine layer, this last layer of wood, you're just going to put your chisel under it and it should just nicely curl up and fold up. And so he does it and it does exactly what he's saying it's going to do. And then I go back to my desk and I'm like, okay, I'm on like the final step. And my thing just dives. And then I'm like, well, maybe I did it wrong. So I kind of back up and I go the other way, dive straight in again. I'm like, dang it. So I'm like, maybe I can just like kind of pop. So I take it and not the move. So I do that and the whole
You're going to have to watch this on video because they don't know what you're not describing it very well.
But basically, you shoulder plane, you saw and you shoulder plane down to basically where this block of wood has a marking knife right underneath it, and there is literally like a fiber of wood left. It's like there's no wood left. That's the idea. And then you take your chisel and you line it up with your marking blade's knife, and so it's basically resting on a flat surface. And all you should need to do if you've got a sharp enough chisel is push the chisel forward, and it should sever all the fibers of the wood. And because there's so little material left, the wood should literally fold up like an ASMR, like wood chopping video or whatever. And it should just go away. And it should be so easy. And you should be left with a smooth surface that's going to reference really nicely against the other smooth surface that you made. Basically, spoiler alert, my chisels were not sharp at all because I'd been working on a hardwood with them. And so they dulled really quickly. So basically, my chisel dove because it wanted to follow the path of least resistance, went in with the grain, like totally messed up the wood fibers. And so if you can imagine the worst tear out you've ever seen, that's what was underneath, like left behind by my chisel process. So I chiseled it out and it tore out. It was crazy. And so I was already behind. So I just put it aside and I was like, I'm not going to deal with this right now. I know I need to stay late. I know I need to work on this. I know I need to sharpen my chisels. I know, like, I've got all these things I need to do. I'm going to catch up. I'm going to finish my shooting board. So I just start painting my shooting boards and like waxing them and getting them like done and ready. Cause I'm just like, I need a mental break. This is pissing me off. And so one thing about this program that's so good is the teachers are actually really amazing. And so Sophie, who's our TA, came up and she was like, hey, Jackson, what are you working on? I was like, Sophie,
you seem angry.
I was like, Sophie, I'm pretty pissed off. And she was like, okay, good. Very nice. Like totally, like really handled it well and was like, well, can I see what you're doing? Like, is it going to offend you if we like go back into it? I was like, no, not at all. So I pulled back everything out again, kind of embarrassingly. I put all my stuff up, and so I'm like, okay, like unlatch my chisel box, get out of chisels. She's like, what chisel were you using on this? And I lied. I was like, I was using this one because it was sharper. Because I had one that was like so dull that I was using.
Like a butter knife.
Yeah. And so I hand her my sharpest chisel. I'm like, I was using this one. And she goes, okay. And then she starts going through it. And she is using a completely different technique than I was using. So basically, when I was chiseling through it originally, it was almost like I was just taking my chisel and like a snow plow, I was just pushing it. And I was thinking like, I'll just, slice it up. And she is like a freaking samurai with this thing and is like almost taking the chisel and making like she's moving the handle of the chisel at like she's not moving it forward and backwards. She's just angling the chisel left and right. So she's taking the blade of the chisel.
Skewing the blade.
Well, and she's not even like skew pushing it. She's just like going and like cutting the fibers of the wood rather than like trying to push through the fibers of the wood. And so I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a better way of doing this. What in the world was I thinking? And so with like the same block of wood, she's like taking this thing
Beautifully,
and beautifully like just devouring this thing. And so I was like, okay.
All right, get out of here.
No. I go, I think this chisel's not as sharp. Can you do the same thing with it?
So you gave her the one you did and said
same thing. She did the same thing and just totally did it right. And I was like, oh, okay. Anyway,
those are good moments.
So she showed me I was doing it really wrong. And I was just like, I am such an idiot. Like I did it. I was just doing it totally wrong.
That's a good story.
Yeah. So needless to say, I went, which is good. So I went into class the next day and I just sat for like 45 minutes at the start of class and sharpened my tools.
Yeah.
Crazy how that works. Also, it didn't help because I walked in, like I was pretty mentally dead. It was like 3:34 at the time when she came over and did that. And our class is over at 4:30. So I came in the next day and I looked at my chisels. Like I hadn't really like looked at the tip of the blade because I was just like, they've been sharp. They're good. I looked at the tip of it and it was like a jagged, like I had so many marks that were like, it had been, anyway, so it was not in good shape. So I went, sharpened everything, sharpened my shoulder plane, 3 chisels. And I was like, okay, let's do this thing. So I went back in and.
Amazing what sharp tools helps.
It was night and day difference. And so I was able to do it. It is still slow going and it is still really hard. And so then we're like, I'm ready to show Steve. And I brought it. So Ryan's across from me. He's like 4 joints in. That sounds way worse than it is. He's got 4 of his done. And so I'm like, can you look at mine? Can you just give me like see if Steve would, because I'm about to show Steve. And he goes, yeah. Matt, the guy behind him, goes, do you need a Post-it note? Yeah. Ryan's like, yeah, he checks the seams with a Post-it note. He sees if he can fit a Post-it note in between. Did they do that with you guys?
I don't remember that particular thing.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at these joints and I can see daylight through mine. So I'm like, that's a Post-it note's getting in easy. He checked it, was like, you need to firm up this shoulder. You need to fix that. So I do. And then I go show Steve. Sure enough, Steve pulls out a Post-it note and goes, yeah, there's a little bit of light, but for the most part, these are good. These are, move on. And so I moved on to my second one. And anyway, I'm slowly working through those. I told Natalie, hey, I'm going to stay late and I'm going to work on a bunch of these joints and like try and get them done. And in the time that class finished till like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., I was sitting there working for like 3 hours and I only got 2 joints done. So they are slow going.
But I mean, again, if this episode's about apprenticeship and things like that, this is what an apprenticeship is, right? This is what, practicing and learning and sharpening tools and figuring out how to get to quality, how to get to excellence, and the work that you're doing to get to that level of perfection. Yeah. Which, realize that with power tools, you can't. The Post-it note thing is kind of irrelevant because, your blade wobbles or whatever else when you turn your saw on and stuff like that. It's just people wouldn't look at that level of precision. That's almost a furniture level of precision that you're bringing to home building, which is another thing that, this apprenticeship is good for. So, I mean, you're struggling and fighting through the exact right things. This is how you become a craftsman. This is how this is how you learn quality, right?
Did y'all do the joinery and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Were yours is like tight tolerances like that? Or did you struggle with yours? Like, were yours easy?
Everything was easy for me, Jackson.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
No, I've been kind of waiting to have this conversation with you. I I'm not a great craftsman. Okay. I can do it.
You hear that, people?
But it takes me a long time. And there was guys in my class who would have the tightest, the nicest joints. Those, unfortunately, you got some ADD from your mom and me. And so there's a restlessness that doesn't give us that craftsman patience to execute at that level of detail. So I didn't know if you inherited that from me or not. I was, top half of my class.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I would say I'm somewhere in there.
And so, but there was guys who were clearly better craftsmen than me who could, just the way, you described her moving your chisel through the thing, that they were doing things like that their joints were always tighter. And you were like, gosh, that is really good.
Yeah.
So,
Kevin came up to, dude, that guy.
Asshole.
Yeah, seriously. He's the nicest guy, but he's like, dude, he came up to our table because he's in the front of the class, Ryan and I are in the back, but we're all friends. And so he was like, I messed this joint up. He brings the joint over and we're like, did you? And I mean, it has like a small bit of blowout.
It's like a vacuum when they open the package. It's like,
no. And he's like, got the joint and he's like, like
waving it in the air, not coming apart.
No, it's not coming apart. But there was like, one of the wood fibers just kicked out a little bit whenever he put it finally together. So like when he pushed it together, one piece just kind of went, and it left like just a small little indent down there. And me and Ryan were like, well, you going to do it again? He's like, no, I'm not going to do it again.
So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of the apprenticeship. I wanted you guys to kind of hear these processes and things that he's working through. It's a slower pace, right? It is.
Yeah, I think that frustrated the person who left. I think that's why they're pissed off with the programs, because it was slow. It was
just didn't have the patience for it.
I think carpentry, they walked in and were like, all right, we're teaching you stuff day one.
Stuff,
But I think when you kind of look at the comparison of the two, it's like, not that carpentry's a great program, but it's just 100%. A different walkthrough method of.
Yeah, and they're training a different level of craftsmanship, and so they're giving a broad view of all the different things that are going on.
They're doing modern things.
Yeah,
like they're looking. They did an asphalt roof.
Yeah,
like we haven't touched an asphalt roof,
right?
But
I guess what I wanted to do was, what does a modern apprenticeship look like? Like what would it look like if you guys went to North Bennett Street, and what would you learn? And the drafting, the hands tools versus power tools, being in the shop, or all the things that are great reminders for me that when I got out and I was trying to tell people the value of it, that you just get exposed to so many different things.
Yeah.
That if you know a great framer and I want to go work for that framer, you will learn how to frame from that great framer.
Yeah.
You're just not exposed to all the other parts and pieces of building that
we're just exposed to so much. Like we're about to get. Like the things that are on the horizon, like this was semester 1, right? Like we're barely into semester 2, but we're going to go do like, what is it called? Oh my gosh, that's embarrassing. Plaster. We're going to do a bunch of plaster. We're going to be doing masonry, like historic masonry with an Italian mason guy. We're going to be doing, oh my gosh, we're doing so much. Glazing, lead paint restoration. Well, not restoration, but how to handle it and how to dispose of it. We're doing linseed oil paint, like how to mix it, how to make your own. Like we're doing so much more, and none of those are wood. You know what I mean? Like that's all outside of the wood stuff, and so there's just a lot.
Yeah.
And then obviously we're learning all the wood techniques. We're learning all the.
You'll make doors. You'll make windows.
Totally.
And all that stuff.
We're making a door this.
That's great.
Semester. Yeah, styling.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks for watching.